You're listening to Behind the Wheel on RacingJunk.com. You've read the stories of the drivers and others involved in the sport that we all love. Now hear their stories firsthand via our all-new podcast to find out how their passion for motorsports has made life worth living.
You know, it's a it seems like it's a running thing now that every time we get around this time of year, we're talking about Tom Brady in the freaking Super Bowl.
Well, he didn't go last year.
Well, and even though, I was gonna say, and even though I gave you a bunch of grief over being a Tampa Bay or being a New England fan, here he is taking Tampa Bay to the Super Bowl.
Yep, and I got a Tampa Bay shirt for Christmas.
Oh dear God, was it a Tom Brady jersey?
No, it was just a Tampa Bay long sleeve T-shirt that my mom got me. It's got the Tampa Bay pirate flag on the front. And has Tampa Bay down the arm. It says Tampa Bay down the arm.
I love it.
No, it says Tampa Bay Buccaneers down the arm.
So
or Tampa
are you?
Bay one arm, Buccaneers on the other.
So are you gonna? I take it pull to have Tampa Bay win,
Well,
and obviously, we're here on Behind the Wheel RacingJunk.com, and it's been a while. Happy New Year, Happy New Year, Louise.
Happy New Year to you.
Yeah,
I know it has been forever.
Here in February. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. Tampa Bay's not going to win. Now look,
whatever.
We are recording this before the actual Super Bowl, which is
this Sunday.
Yeah, which is exciting. So this will air after
the Super Bowl.
Yeah, after the Super Bowl. So I want everybody out there to know that right now I'm calling it. Tom Brady's going to throw like 3 interceptions. Gronkowski's going to do exactly what he does, which is stand there with his mouth open and drool a lot. And the Kansas City Chiefs are going to win.
Whatever. I'm calling it too. Tom threw three picks in the championship NFC game. Yes, I know. He was trying to be Aaron Rodgers and throw the ball down the field. It was driving me nuts. We were doing great in the first half. I don't know the second half. Aaron Rodgers got in his head or something. But yeah, the 3 picks. Me and my husband were cussing at the TV and cussing him out. My husband's like, I said throw to the right, not to the left. What are you doing? And I'm like, he can't hear you.
43 years old.
Oh, I love it. Let me tell you, it is a new year, and we are back with Behind the Wheel on RacingJunk.com. And we have let some time pass with the 2021 racing season, still being a bit of a whirlwind. But I think we're kind of kicking things off in a very special way, along with the rest of the racing world. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh yeah, this year just feels a lot different. I mean, it feels different because of COVID, but it also just feels different because we're talking about taking this podcast in a whole new direction. Stay tuned for details on that. And we're kind of starting with a really fantastic guest who I'm really excited about. The first female automotive and motorsports executive. I mean, technically, maybe not technically, if you really want to get technical, the first female, but the first one in a sense where she didn't have to hide.
Right.
And she's also one of the first female IndyCar Series team owners. So I'm so excited to invite Beth Paretta to the podcast.
Yes, I'm really excited. Yeah, I'm really excited to talk to Beth because of her background. I mean, you know how big of a fan I am of Aston Martin.
Oh yeah.
And she worked for Aston Martin. I'm also a fan of the Viper. She worked on the design of the Viper. I mean, this is a big get. I don't know how you're able to pull this one off, Lily.
Thank the good Lord, because honestly, I didn't even know if she would message me back, and I was just like, please come on, because when I saw that she was going to run that she has a team that's going to run the Indy 500 with a female driver,
right?
I was like, come on the podcast, because I'm all about woman power this year, Chris. Yes, I know I've been like that in the past, but this year it might be get kicked in the high gear. Y'all might be like getting them. Y'all might be getting on me because I'll probably get a lot of females this year.
Well, I mean, you know what?
Like,
I think that's
men, damn it.
I think that's indicative of 2021, though, because I mean, think about it. Hey, Haley Deegan kicking off over in the Truck Series. Beth with Simone doing the Indy 500. I mean, ladies are beginning to come to the forefront here in motorsports, which when you mentioned that Beth was the first female IndyCar Series team owner, that didn't have to hide, and was also one of the first motorsports executives as a female. I looked and I was like, oh, how? It's 21.
Yeah. I know. It's amazing that, it's not amazing for the times we're in because that's where we're heading, but it's amazing that she was able to rise up through the ranks before the times we're having now.
Right.
And nobody stopped her because, to be honest, most females I know that have tried to break the glass ceiling in motorsports, it has not been easy. In fact, I mean, yes, driver-wise, not as hard, especially with the money racket that a lot of this is, with money, you don't matter who you are. But,
right.
especially nowadays. But, with racing, anywhere else inside the sport, when you're talking about the business side of it, it's not easy if you're a female to get inside because, honestly, I've ran into a lot of, do you really think you know what you're doing?
Right.
Well,
I mean, Beth absolutely does because she's loaded down with accolades, magazines, or just throwing things at her. She's got a tremendous background. So I'm really excited about talking to her. So I'll tell you what, let's go ahead and get to it. We're gonna take a quick break, pay the bills, so to speak, and when we come back, we will be talking with Beth Paretta here on Behind the Wheel on RacingJunk.com. Hang on.
Attention racers, race fans, and gearheads. If you're looking to buy, sell, or trade the stuff that stokes your engine, then check out RacingJunk.com. RacingJunk.com is the world's #1 online racing and performance classifieds, where you'll find what you need to rock your ride. Check us out at RacingJunk.com. Racing and performance classifieds built to go fast.
Welcome back to Behind the Wheel on RacingJunk.com. All right, Lil E. Let me tell you what, once again, you have gone above and beyond the call and landed just a ginormous get for this shoddy little podcast. We are honored. We are honored to have joining us. You heard us talking about her at the beginning, Beth Paretta with Paretta Autosports, and just a tremendous background. You know the name if you know racing. Beth, welcome to Behind the Wheel.
Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, it's an honor. It's an absolute honor. Now, we were talking a little bit before we began, and how's everything in the beautiful city of Detroit right now?
Detroit's lovely. I guess we got some snow coming, but it's winter. It's fine. I'm a New Englander, so the cold. I remember when I first moved here, I was like, oh my gosh, wait till you see the winters. I'm like, I lived in northern Vermont. I think I've got this. And sure enough, it's fine.
See, and next week I'm in Minneapolis, where the high is -1. I
will say this, with all due to the Minneapolians, is that what they're called?
Minneapolisians?
Napoleons. Very small people. I have never been so cold as 2 years ago. I was at a Supercross race in Minneapolis. I was at the Mercedes-Benz Center, lovely venue. I was walking from there to my hotel because I've been working for a French racing fuel company on top of everything else. And so we're the official fuel of KTM and Husqvarna and now Gas motocross, supercross teams. So I was at the Supercross event in January or early February. It was like, literally a year ago, February in Minneapolis. It was that kind of cold where like your eyes just tear up. And as the water comes down your cheeks and it freezes and burns, I was like, how do people live here?
You're not helping
seriously, me. Those are hardy folk.
Well, and I call it Tiny Pepsi. Do you know why I call it Tiny Pepsi?
No.
Minnesota.
I see it.
Minnesota, haha.
I see it.
Chris has the coins.
Hey, be sure to tip the wait staff.
Right. Here all week.
That's right. So Beth, tell us a little bit about yourself and your career in the automotive and motorsports world, because you have really run the gamut from stem to stern.
I mean, sure, I guess so. It's so funny when it's one of those things, and maybe it's just like the way my personality is, like, it doesn't occur to me of the stuff I've done or where I've been until like somebody else says it. Like, that's a lot of stuff. I'm like, yeah, I guess it is.
Right.
Because when you're in the middle of it, you're just getting it done. Right. So you don't think of it as, in fact, even when I was at FCA, which we'll get to, but here, running like the business of a performance brand in racing, it wasn't until somebody pointed out to me, like, that you're the first woman to have that kind of role globally. And I was like, oh yeah, I guess you're right. Like, and it was just that moment of, because again, you're just busy doing your job. You don't really think of it as different or whatever. You just kind of, I've got stuff to do. I've got meetings to go to and
Right.
things to do. But yeah, I've been a car fanatic my whole life. I mean, this is genuine. I would say that anyone who's known me is not really surprised by where I am now, only because I was that kid who had posters of cars on my wall, genuinely did. People can vouch. And I didn't necessarily think that I would work in automotive, which is a funny thing. And that's why I'm so passionate now to tie the idea of, we all ask the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? And the idea of kind of lighting the story and the path to how you get to certain careers, but what that person does for a living.
Right.
So even whether you're the host of a radio show or you are, a general contractor building homes, what does that actually mean? And we see things and kids see things, but I think most adults don't know what other adults do. What do those jobs entail? And so talking more about that, I think, would be helpful for everybody, because there's a lot of hidden genius around. And in fairness, I probably should have been a mechanical engineer and all that. And I didn't go that path because it wasn't something that I was exposed to. I grew up in Connecticut. I'm from New England. And after high school and in college, I kind of fell into the alpine skiing business because that was a passion, and I worked at a ski shop, and then I kind of parlayed that and kind of went, climbed up that ladder, and then went to graduate school because I decided, all right, I want to get a formal education in business because my undergraduate wasn't. So I get a business degree and knew that, all right, I wasn't going to stay in the ski business because it was weather dependent. And
right.
There's so many variables in every business. It's like, depending on a lot of snow is a tough way to make a living. And again, fair play to everybody who's in. Shout out to all my ski brethren, because that's a grind. Because you can have a great winter and then you can have a terrible winter, and you don't do anything different as a business owner, and you are,
it's completely out of your control.
Completely out of control.
Yeah.
So anyway, I thought, all right, I got to make a pivot, and I thought, okay, automotive, because I've always been passionate about cars, reading car magazines, watching racing, but where do I fit? So I moved back home, like most people do after grad school, boomerang,
right,
back to my parents to save money. And I took a job at a car dealership, and because I wanted to learn how it worked, because I thought, if you could apply like smart business principles to a car dealership, like maybe I could be successful at that, but I don't know anything about it. I don't come from that kind of business. And so I took a job selling cars. And when I walked in for the interview, and in fairness, they'll kind of hire anyone to sell cars.
Yes. Retail sales is a revolving door. Absolutely.
Revolving door.
Yeah.
But I sat down with the general manager of the dealership for the interview, and I said, I want to learn about this business.
Right.
So if it's okay, I'd like to come in on my day off, which because you have like a day off in the middle of the week. Mm-hmm. I think my day off was Thursday. And I was like, I want to come in on my day off. And can I sit in the parts department, and can I sit with a service manager, and can I sit with a service writer? Like, I just want to see what they do. And of course he looked at me like I was crazy, because I was.
Right.
And it was like postgraduate work. I was like a guinea pig, and I wanted to I wanted to learn about it, and started reading automotive news. Subscribed to that, started reading that week in and week out. And from there started at one dealership, went to another one a year later. That was more high luxury, more of a luxury segment, because that was like a better fit to, I wanted to learn that side of the business too. And it was similar to like my ski customers. Mm-hmm. So I actually switched to an Audi dealership, Audi Porsche store. And I was there for, not even a half a year, when I met somebody that worked for Audi corporate. And he mentioned, he's like, yeah, I'm just finishing up my MBA. I was like, oh, good for you. I said, I got mine a couple of years ago. And he looked at me, he's like, wait, what? And he's like, what are you doing here? And I was like, well, I want to learn the business and, maybe work for a car company. And he's like, well, what do you want to do? I'm like, well, I don't know. I don't know where I would fit. He said, give me your resume. And so, emailed him my resume.
Wow.
And I had an interview like a week later, and I wound up getting a job in finance.
Oh, right on. Okay.
For Volkswagen Group. And it was funny because I remember that interview. That's like they're going to take a chance on me, and they did, because I just came out of a dealership.
Yeah, they don't know.
Yeah. And I have a lot of those moments in my life where someone's going to take a chance on me. I'm the risky candidate.
But a risky candidate with an MBA, a drive, and a personality, that's about as low risk as you can get. That's like saying, I think I'm going to invest in real estate. Oh,
right.
okay.
Right. You know what I'm going to buy? Apple stock.
Yeah.
Right. 20 years ago. Right. Yeah.
Not GameStop. We're going to go Apple.
Right. Right. So it worked out. It worked out well. And so I did that for, I did that for like 3 years, a little bit more than that. But what was fantastic is, so here's why I stick out like a sore thumb there. I actually care about cars, and I care about the car business. And because I'm reading automotive news, yes, I'm working for Volkswagen Group. So I'm visiting Volkswagen dealers, Audi dealers, Bentley dealers, Lamborghini dealers. Great. Right. But as I'm sitting there with that dealer principal, I could talk to him also about his Honda business and his Chevy business, just because I'm reading it. I'm up on it because I am interested in it. So it's like anything. You can, I firmly believe that if you're interested and have, the right attitude, the actual skills can be taught.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah,
absolutely.
So I could sit there and talk to a dealer and just kind of shoot the breeze. Like before we get to like the stuff I'm here about today, yeah, tell me how's your Honda business going and what's going on with Chevy? Oh, I see you're building a new Chevy dealership down the street. How's that going? And immediately, you kind of had street cred. I also had street cred because I'd sold cars. Right. Because I'd worked on a floor of a dealership.
Yep. You had respect.
Most of the people most of the people in that role have come right out of college. So I did that. And then from there at an industry function, I met the vice president of Aston Martin. I'm so jealous over this. You do have to drive cars, whether it be engineering or otherwise.
Right.
As you can imagine, because especially if you're in this in that type of category of car. So Aston Martin, I joined just as it was being sold off from Ford. So I was actually the first employee of the new company.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. In 2007. Meaning technically, everybody was just being transitioned, but I was like the first new hire. And in fact, I was hired just as it was going on. There was a bit of a freeze. So I had to kind of cool my heels for maybe like a month or two before I actually could officially join. But with that said, because of the tie-up with Ford, they used a lot of the resources that Ford had. So we would use their proving grounds, and we would do like training for employees, or when you bought a Vanquish, I think you actually got a day at the track.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm sure they still do it for the highest end vehicles. And at the time, so there was one in Belgium, one in the UK, and the one in the US is actually in Detroit. I lived in Boston area at the time, but it's the Ford Proving Ground in Romeo, Michigan.
Oh, wow.
And if you've ever been to a proving ground, there's different sections of it. They have the miles straight, they have the bowl, they have the road course and hill course, as you learn different skills or test different things in a vehicle. And so the fastest I've ever driven a vehicle was a Vanquish S on the mile straight at the Ford Proving Grounds in Romulus, Michigan. And I think I hit 186.
Oh my God.
It's like the number that always sticks in my mind. And it's so funny because you're in a mile straight and there's somebody sitting right seat. And so, and the purpose was to go, that was kind of the purpose, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Well, yeah, you have
he's
to.
Like telling me to do this.
Yeah.
And it was that moment of like obviously two hands on the wheel, looking straight ahead. And I remember like hitting the top speed because then you get to like where the cones are, where then you have to decelerate. So like you're basically going as fast as you can until you get to these cones, because it's just math at that point.
Oh, I love it.
So the instructor's like saying like, okay, now decelerate. So like you're just like letting your foot off, and then you're like, hitting the brakes. But in fairness, he's like, did you see how fast? Like, oh God, no, I didn't look at anything. Like, you're just looking straight ahead.
Plus, it's a split second.
White knuckling it.
Yeah, it's a split second too. Oh, that's awesome.
He could have told me it was 47 miles an hour. I would have believed him. But yeah, no, it was 186. But it's in a Vanquish S.
I was already jealous. Now I'm even more jealous.
Right. So I was actually out. So this is the funny thing. I was out at Pebble Beach, and I'm at the Concours, and I wind up meeting through sort of mutual friends. I meet the then vice president, the U.S. He's like the head of the U.S. Division for Aston Martin. And just kind of having small talk. But again, because I've been reading all these, automotive news, and I just was aware of the industry. So if you're going to work in an industry, any industry, like if you're right out of college and you get a job in the steel industry, read about the business, because you never know who you're going to interact with, right?
Yep.
So
Amen.
be able to carry on a conversation. about something that's outside of your little purview. So chatting with him, he's like, "Oh, what do you do?" And I had because it was Volkswagen Group, I actually had like 3 business cards, and I had a business card that said Bentley Financial Services on it. So of course, if I'm talking to the Aston Martin guy, let me give him that.
Heck
card.
yeah.
So I did, and he's like, we need to establish our financial side of our business. Would you be interested in? And it wasn't right then. In fairness, it was just like a polite talk. And then I think he emailed me out of the blue like 6 months later. Hey, we need some help on the finance side. Would you be willing to talk? And whenever in your career somebody says, "Hey, do you want to talk?" you say yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we met. It was around the time of the New York Auto Show, which I was going to anyway, and met him at had lunch and chatted, and he was explaining to me what you do and tell me what you do. And so within like a week, they flew me to England to meet with the president of Aston Martin.
Wow.
And I will say, here's a woman mistake that I made. They said, "We'd like you to be the global head of finance for that side of finance, like not the CFO, like the finance that would set up like the finance that you need for the dealers."
Sure, like F&I almost.
Yeah, exactly, like a global F&I. And I was like, I don't know that I'm qualified for that. A guy would have said yes.
He would have said, I'm available.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I could do it. Yeah.
200%.
He would have been measuring the corner office for the new curtains.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, but I did the typical woman thing, which is I'm not qualified for that. No. And in fairness, they said, "Okay, well, how about this job?" And I said, "Sure." The reality is, could I have done the other job? Oh God, yes, I could.
Yeah.
And women, and it's funny, I didn't know in that moment that I made that typical woman mistake. It wasn't until like a few months later, 6 months later, I was talking to a woman who worked at Chase Automotive Finance, who I met, this great lady called Gail Timmerman, who wound up being like, there's all these people that are kind of like these little in the ether, like mentors, peer-to-peer mentors, whatever. There's people that you have a coffee with, and they kind of give you those little pearls of wisdom. And I told her about that conversation. She's like, well, isn't that a typical female answer? I was like, what do you mean? She's like, a guy would have just said yes and taken the job.
Right.
Oh my God, you're right.
But you know what?
Why do we do that?
We do it. We hold ourselves back. Listen, and I always say this, listen, women are not a minority. We're 51% of the population.
Right.
That's right.
Right.
The only people who keep women back are themselves.
Do you think, especially now with where we're at with 2021, do you think that it's because that just brash honesty that I love it. Yeah, I love it. That brash honesty that comes out has finally kind of made its way through all the chaff of the guys who have said, well, of course I can do that job, Roger, and then end up falling flat on their face because people like Beth said, you know what? I love it. I'm just not qualified. But now there's been time, there's been progress, and that's why we're beginning to see more women take the helm of companies and more women step into the forefront. Because it's just worked its way through.
If you look at Fortune 500 companies, so what's interesting is there are a lot of women CEOs, not a lot, but there are women CEOs, some high profile women. Where there are women lacking, so if you're looking at that pyramid, there are women lacking in that top third. So you have a lot in the middle, and then you do have some visible women who kind of broke through, and they might be like, statistical events. They're like the anomaly.
Right.
And so they're great visually, because I do think all of that helps, because it helps the pipeline for people to see it, for girls to see it. And the reason we all say like why you have to see examples, and you hear that all the time, and it's true. And with all due, white men have always seen themselves. So it's no insult or critique of a white man when we say those things. You've never known any different. You've always seen yourself as the president of the United States. You've always seen yourself as a scientific leader or whatever, like name the role. You've always seen yourself as an astronaut. And so you just had the luxury of always seeing yourself. So again, it's no insult or no discredit to anything that men have done.
Right.
But in those moments, I used to use the example, but I'm so dating myself when I use the example of Sally Ride. Yeah. When Sally Ride became the first woman in space, first American woman in space. But when she was very visible, there was all of this press around her, rightfully so, girls started going to space camp.
Yeah.
Yep.
My wife is a prime example of that.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah,
Did she do that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, and she's from Texas, and she's right in that wave of she was a kid when Sally was really gaining some popularity, and it was like, well, yeah, of course you can go to space camp. Why?
Right.
It's not limited to just guys. It's just girls didn't apply before.
Didn't think it was possible, didn't think it was for them. And thank God Sally Ride did that, where she saw it and she's like, well, why not me? It's funny because somebody asked me this the other day. They're like, well, why did you think you could start an IndyCar team? I'm like, why wouldn't I be able to?
Exactly.
It's this weird thing. Like, it didn't occur to, and several of these steps along the way, like, okay, I have this job at a car dealership, and like, okay, now I'm going to get a corporate job in finance for Volkswagen. Well, why did you think you could do that? Well, it didn't occur to me that I couldn't do that. And then I moved to Aston Martin in a completely different role. Well, it didn't occur to me that I couldn't. And maybe that's just my own naivete.
Right.
No, it's having confidence to know you can do whatever, not based on your gender, but just who you
give
are
it a go.
and your knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's try it. And again, I because of having those 10,000 hours of having read, been knowing every car that's on the road since I'm 5 years old, allowed me that comfort level. I remember, it's funny, I think of these little things in fits and starts, but I get hired eventually. So I leave Aston Martin. I then meet Ralph Gilles, who at the time was the CEO of Dodge when I first met him. And he's of course doing the head of design for US at the time for FC. Now he's global head of design.
Viper. Mr. Viper.
Big deal.
Yeah.
He was always a big deal, but I mean, he's even a bigger deal. But I met Ralph Gilles also around the New York Auto Show at an industry event. I was working for Aston Martin. My name tag, of course, said my name in Aston Martin. And as a designer, of course, he's like, oh my God, I love Aston Martin. I said, of course you do. You're a designer. Because let's be honest, they're the prettiest.
True.
And I asked him, have you ever driven one? And he said, no. And I said, okay, well, the next time I'm in Detroit, which is probably going to be like in 2 months, we were launching a new car at that point. I said, I'll give you a call. I'd love for you to come down to the dealership in the Detroit area, and we'll have you drive it. And that's the thing that happens. It's like a professional courtesy that we do behind the scenes, because as a designer, as an engineer, check it out, And
I need to get on that level where it's extended to me because it never has been, but hey, it's okay.
It's all who you know, right? No.
Right.
So he did. So we did. It was like 2 months later, and it was a Saturday, so it would be kind of quiet. And I hosted him at this dealership where I was to be there for like a customer event that was going to happen that night, but I'd flown in that morning. So I arranged it for Ralph to come by, and I spent like 2 hours with him talking about the layout of the dealership, which is beautiful. And we're talking about the cars. So like all the cars in the line, and it was just like car guy to car guy. So from there, this relationship starts where like a few months later, he texts me. He's like, hey, I want to pick your brain about something. And believe me, I do have those moments of like, okay, CEO of Dodge, like texting me to pick believe me, because I'm still that kid, as a fan or just like a complete geek.
Right.
And those moments aren't lost on me.
Right. Yes.
Right.
I'm in the same boat. But it's only certain industries. Automotive is one, and Ellen can vouch for this. She is the gearhead. She's the race head. I'm more of the shtick guy. But there are certain cars.
He knows more than he thinks he does.
Please, if you see my giant head, you'll understand that it's just a vapid empty space. There are some vehicles out there, some industries, and some manufacturers that I just fanboy over. Aston Martin's one. Dodge is another.
Is it?
Oh, absolutely.
I've never really fanned out over Dodge. I know they got cool sports cars, but I don't know. I've never fanned out over Dodge.
I always did. Well, the Viper. That's why I was like, when I saw Beth's name come up, I was like, what do you
will say, like, I love the Gen 5 Viper. I like a Gen 2 as well, but the Gen 5 Viper, which I was fully immersed in and integrated in and worked to launch, I love that car. It's a beautiful car. It's beautifully built. The materials, it's a proper car. And what's funny about it, and I didn't realize this until I worked there, two little facts that are kind of cool. A Viper looks like a big car.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's shorter than a 911.
Yeah, it is.
Visually,
I think it's
a
just
911
makes
is
it look
taller.
bigger.
Right.
Yeah.
So it tricks your eye.
Yeah.
A Viper is actually smaller than, like in pictures and when you see it, but when you actually get up to a Viper is actually small. It's just because it's got the long nose at the front.
Yeah, I was going to say the long nose makes it look big. Yeah.
But it's
Totally.
such
It's
a
an
gorgeous
inch
car.
shorter. But the other thing that's kind of cool is they're hand built. They're not anymore. They're not built anymore, but they were hand built. It takes longer to paint a Viper than it does to build a Porsche 911 or a Corvette. It takes longer to paint a Viper.
Holy smokes.
They're
that's a
so
fact I did not know.
handmade.
Yeah, I was gonna say because of the hand. Oh wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's legit. It's a legit car. I mean, but like anything, it's got tons of torque. It's not for the faint of heart.
No.
It comes with 3 pedals.
I mean, it was for me because I got to drive them when I was down in Texas, but only for the the radio station promos because we had one as a station vehicle. I was great. I loved it. Are you kidding me? I got so many tickets in that thing. It was ridiculous. They fired me twice from that radio station. It was beautiful.
Did you burn your calves on the side exhaust?
No, I didn't. It's funny
when there's quirky things to cars that you know about, right?
It's funny you mentioned that because we had a program director who refused to drive it because every time, like 2 or 3 times, he would burn his freaking. He'd burn his legs.
100%. Don't wear shorts and get out and not know that that's there. Right.
Oh, that's great that you brought that up.
Yeah.
So here we are, 2021. And you own your own female race team. You're going to run the 105th running of the Indy 500 with Simone. Tell me, how did this come about? Because I remember 2016.
Yep.
And I remember 2010 when she was Rookie of the Year.
Yeah.
And then so tell me, take me back to 16. What happened, and now why 21?
16 at the 11th hour. Honestly, it was just a logistics issue with equipment. And there we had a driver, had money, had sponsors, had an engine. There was a shortage of chassis, and I had a deal with a team that we were going to run with, and we were going to make the big announcement at Long Beach, which is middle of April.
Yeah.
And literally had a press conference scheduled, the whole 9. And 2 days before, the team that I was working with, they tried to change the terms of the deal. And it was not agreeable to me. So I walked away and I said, thanks, but no, we're gonna take our things and go. But then that set me on a path for the next. Okay, now I've got 7 weeks. How do I find another team, another chassis, and what do I do? In fairness, this happens. This is an unfortunate thing that can happen in racing. It wasn't unique to me. It had nothing to do with the fact that it was a lady team, nothing. I mean, in theory, it kind of did because the person that tried to change the terms of the deal was like, well, I don't know if this is the first race. I mean, it turned out behind the scenes, he thought he was going to get some more money from somewhere else. Instead of asking me for more money because I had more money, but he didn't know that. You always have more in your back pocket if you're doing it the right way. Like any negotiation, but he didn't even give me the opportunity to, so it was unfortunate. So anyway, it sets me off on this path of, okay, 7 weeks, I need to now regroup and find another partner and another car. So it was just a mad dash, and ultimately found a car, but with literally 3 weeks to go before we had to get on the grid. It was just a timing issue. Can we get the parts? Can we get ready? And ultimately, these are those decisions that rest on a team owner of, it wasn't safe. It wasn't right. We weren't sure that we were going to be able to get the parts in time. I'm not going to put any driver in anything that isn't race worthy.
Right.
So I was in Indianapolis, physically in a shop, looking at this last car that was in pieces, which is what even if you're getting it, you're going to take it apart anyway. So that's not unusual, but figuring out, okay, is this workable? I had people there looking at it with me because I have no business inspecting a car. I'm running the program, the business, whatever. I'm not a car chief.
Going back to the finance thing, I'm going to go ahead and say, I don't believe that for 1 second.
I mean, I learned. I
bet you could. I bet you could. I bet you get inspected better than most. Okay, please continue.
Listen, I am no stranger to. I mean, I can fix stuff around the house. Believe me, I'm a handy.
Right.
And if they taught me, oh God, I would be so over the wall doing anything. If I had, give me a couple of months to teach me, I'll learn it.
Right.
And I'd love to.
Yep.
With that said, I'm sitting there, okay, this is not right. And so I pull the plug, and I had to get in the car and drive back to Detroit, which is about a 5-hour drive. And so I was, alone with my thoughts. And I knew that the decision was going to be that to pull the plug and, have to put out that press release.
Right.
And I knew that I was going to wear it, and that's fine. That's what happens. And I had a lot of stuff going on, like behind the scenes, newsflash, which nobody knew. My dad was in palliative care, about to transition to hospice care. My mom had died a couple of years before. I'm the sole caregiver of my dad.
Man.
And so like, there's all these other things that were swirling, which have nothing to do with anything, but now I can reveal that everyone close to me knew.
Yeah. It's all impactful. Yeah.
Yes. And so, the takeaway there is, listen, everybody can have any comment they want on the little chat, whatever thing, the comments under any news story. God bless. And please continue to do that, because that obviously gives you joy. But you don't know, you don't know what goes into putting a car on the grid. You don't know you don't know all the factors. You don't know what contracts were in place, what contracts at the 11th hour changed. You don't know how easy it is to get an engine contract from HPD or Chevy. I had both of them.
Wow.
Yeah. And in that mad dash between Long Beach and the 500, if you knew who within the IndyCar paddock was helping me, were there some people who could have helped more? Sure.
Absolutely.
But were there some who went out of their way and absolutely helped? Yes. Those people who were trying to help: Roger Penske, Tim Cindric, Rob Dyson, who is a longtime racing guy who stepped up, Paul Fanner from Racer Magazine, Marshall Pruitt, who's a journalist, just like, because like they have their ear to the ground, like, hey, we think there's a car here, we think there's this, we think there's that. So Mike Hull from Ganassi. I had a conversation with JF Thorman from Andretti and Michael Andretti. Everybody, I happen to be in a wonderful position that these are people that I've known for years and have worked with or known in different capacities. So when I needed to call in a favor or call for advice, they were all there.
That's awesome.
So people from the outside might have thought I was a rookie and didn't know what I was doing. And that was not the case.
Right. Yeah. It sounds like not only is that not the case, but the fact that Roger's involved this year. Yeah. I mean, you got Simone.
Yeah, Simone Di Silvestro. Yeah, she's the real deal.
That's huge. That's not a luck thing. Given what happened in 2016, that's people inside the industry had respect, and they knew, and they were like, right. You know what, we're going to put some chips on Beth and see what's going to happen in 21.
Right. And in fairness, Simona, so when I talked to Roger, so I've known Roger for years. I actually met him when I worked for Aston Martin because he was one of my dealers.
Oh, okay.
What? Yes.
What?
So Aston,
if he owned a V12 Vanquish, I'm going to hate him even that much more.
He probably does.
He owns a lot of cars. So.
He owns everything.
He probably owns all the cars, right?
Yes, he does.
Yeah, he has a collection, or had quite
so many dealerships. He's over 100 dealerships around the world. But when I worked for Aston Martin, he had 3 Aston Martin dealerships in the United States.
Wow.
Tyson's Corner, Virginia, which is Washington, D.C., Scottsdale, and San Diego. He has since sold 2 of them, so he still has Scottsdale. Mm-hmm. But I used to call on the dealership in the D.C. area, and Roger will like to tell this story, but our first interaction ever, I yelled at him on the phone.
Nice.
I love it. You go, girl.
And I like to say that, and he likes to say that. The reality is I didn't yell at him. I just might have been a bit stern.
You were being real.
Well, what guy is ever actually going to admit that a lady yelled at him? I mean, come on.
We yelled back and forth. And it was funny, too, because even the other day, we were traveling down to Indianapolis for the press conference. Mm-hmm. And this just shows you like how his mind works. So the reason we got into an argument when he was a dealer was having something to do with a violation of the dealer agreement. And so we had to have this phone call. And I was actually having the conversation. I was at his dealership, and I was meeting with his, like the area general manager. That was meant to be the meeting. Mm-hmm. And just as I'm walking in for the meeting with him, this guy said to me, Roger's going to be joining us via phone call. And I was like, Roger, like I'd never met him. And
Oh.
of course he's like my business hero. I'm thinking, oh, sure. Yeah, not a problem. Like just totally faking it, like keep cool.
Right.
And he calls in and it's on speakerphone, like, you know, like this
Old speakerphones. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So the guy and I are sitting across, you know, the table from each other, and here's this phone in the middle with this disembodied voice, and it's Roger, like, hey, hello, Beth, Roger Penske. And he just launches into like, listen, this is why we did this and why we did that. And I was like, well, but this is why. And I just like, and it was just like holding the point. And,
give and take. Yeah,
right,
absolutely.
and defending.
He was like, how is this?
It was just like a business, you know, disagreement.
Mm-hmm.
Did you pull a look, kid? The real Roger Penske wouldn't come up with such a harebrained idea.
I should have, right?
Oh, that had been awful.
Is this really you? Right. So we hang up the phone. So we go through the whole thing, and when we hang up the phone, because basically he said, like, listen, I'm just trying to do this. And I'm like, listen, I'm trying to protect a brand, and this is this, and this is that. And I didn't, you know, whatever. And so we hang up the phone. And it was that moment where, and the gentleman who I'm sitting across from, I had just met him that day too, because I was mostly dealing with like the general manager of the store, and this has been elevated because it's escalated, right? But it was that moment where we hang up the phone, and I just look at this guy, and I like without any filter, I said to him, I go, I just raised my voice to Roger Penske, like. Right? Like full on.
I love it.
And he looked at me and he smiled and he said, he'll respect you for it. And
Love
I said,
it.
That's good.
really? And he goes, because you were right.
Boom.
Yeah, drop the hammer, drop the mic.
I bet he absolutely would respect that. That's another reason why I think so many people have given you those shots and quote unquote to taking those risks on you. Because right away,
I'm kind of curious, Chris, how, you know, Beth, you've been involved in a lot of different automotive sides of the sport, both motorsports and automotive. What made you want to go after IndyCar? You've had other connections and other sides of the sport. Why IndyCar? I mean, because I love IndyCar, but I'm just curious.
So it's funny when I was thinking about, so back when I was at Fiat Chrysler, because I had the SRT brand, I also had that job came with running all of motorsport and again, the business of it. And in fairness, the engineering stuff would feed up to the business side because it was always under marketing. So although yes, we had people, you know, my colleagues who were on the engineering side, the budget still came out of, you know, I happened to hold the budget. So that's why I had to kind of touch all of the different series and whatnot. But what we were always doing was evaluating different series because with the Fiat Chrysler group, we're now Stellantis. Don't ask, I don't know. But because there were multiple brands, we would look at different racing series to figure out if we were looking at a series, what brand would it fit best with? And there were times when IndyCar, of course, reached out to us. I looked at Formula E, I looked at IndyCar. So I evaluated it from, you know, the business case of it. And I, you know, traveled to IMS. I went to a few different IndyCar races in that role. And I'm basically an OEM coming in. And so of course you get the red carpet treatment and you know, you're at the 500, or I think I was there, if it was qualifying weekend, maybe it wasn't the race weekend. I think it was qualifying weekend or Indy GP. I can't remember the timing, but like I was, you know, in the pagoda suites and whatever, because they're giving me the dog and pony, but I'm evaluating it as business. So I had kind of already been aware of IndyCar in that guise. And then when I was at FCA, I got to know, I just got to know more people in IndyCar paddock. I had a relationship with Michael Andretti because Ryan Hunter-Reay was a driver of ours in the Viper. And that started a dialogue with Michael. And then we were talking to him about coming to Dodge as a NASCAR team. That's a story for another podcast.
I had some rumors about that kind of thing. So.
We will have many.
Pull up a chair and pour a cocktail. That's a story.
I bet so. I just can't see him in NASCAR, and I don't know why he'd want to go that route, but that's okay.
I know, but he does. He still does. So I got to know them, and then to the point where then they were also promoting a bunch of races, and we wound up getting involved with them with the Baltimore Grand Prix. And we wound up being a sponsor of that because Andretti was the promoter of that, and that was at the time American Le Mans Series, which is now IMSA, but ALMS and IndyCar race. So got to know a lot of the IndyCar. You know, again, I'm kind of always around. And then socially got to know most of the folks on the Ganassi team. Because of somebody that I was dating at the time worked with the Ganassi team. So I got to know them. I knew Andretti because of this NASCAR conversation and then the promotion stuff on racing series or race events, and then Penske I knew. So I was sort of they just kind of became this peer group, and so it just seemed like, a logical next step. I love IndyCar racing, always have. Yeah. And then when the 500 idea came, that came to me from, at the time, the gentleman who was managing Catherine Legg is a guy called Adrian Sussman. He manages drivers in F1 and IndyCar. And when you are in the role of a head of motorsports for a car company, every driver and driver manager reaches out to you because you hire drivers.
Right.
So I knew Adrian, and he reached out to me for something unrelated. And he's like, hey, can I run an idea by you? Because they had just signed Catherine Legg. And he said, what do you think about putting together like an all ladies team? Like not asking me for me to be involved, but like running this idea by me. Like, hey, you're a woman in motorsport. What do you think? I was like, yeah, that's cool. Like that'd be a great idea.
I've been waiting on that. I mean, it needed to be done a long time ago. They tried it back in the 60s. Didn't really. That was mostly just an all-girl pit crew, though. But they didn't have a driver.
Right. So. And then there was, and then it's funny because you see these announcements. I will say this is one thing that does kind of crack me up is when people are like, this is the first all-woman this, and it's like 3 women driving in a sports car in IMSA. Like that's first of all, that was done in 1966. So like just Wikipedia, you can find it out. And I don't like, and saying it's an all woman team when it's all women drivers, that's a different nuance. And believe me, having all women drivers lineup, absolutely. That's awesome. And I love to see that. And that's a fantastic thing for fans or whatever, but that's not an all woman team. Like tell that to, Jim, who's turning the wrench or driving the truck.
Right.
And believe me, I'm not aspiring, like we're not, even my team is not going to be all women for a while, because, and that's important to understand because I'm taking women from other series, I'm taking junior people, and we're it's like this ladder to get them up to speed. And so they're going to be working with that seasoned veteran. But to be honest, that's what every team does.
Right. But I guess my big question is, why has it been so long? Like when Ellen told me, oh yeah, no, she's the first team owner, the first female team owner. I was like, really?
I'm not entirely. The only nuance, there was a woman team owner in 1929 that won.
Yeah. So
it's
been quite a while. So that's why they're basically saying she's the first.
Maud Yeagle. But she went by M.A. Yeagle because if she used her first name, it'd be a tip-off that she was a woman. So she did it secretly. Yeah,
because she had to kind of hide it. So it wasn't really promoted because you couldn't promote that back then.
Wow.
Women weren't allowed into the paddock in IndyCar until the 70s.
Exactly. So she wasn't really known as the female owner.
And there were other team owners because usually they owned the teams with their husbands.
And that's kind of how they alluded with her.
Yes. And so over the years, there have been other women team owners and certainly very, high profile women, but they've usually owned it in partnership with their husbands or fathers or whereas, I'm just me. What's unique here is I'm a female team owner with a female driver. That's
exactly.
Right.
Yeah, that's a first. And then also being very forward about, so here's the funny thing that I will say.
And first female automotive and motorsports executive. So
I was, at that level. I mean,
at that level, yes, exactly.
And
you can tip your hat about.
Yeah, I was going to say, own
because
it.
there's not enough of that.
I know. It just, the one thing I will say too, that for all of us, and I even say this when I talk to hiring engineers and mechanics, we did this the last round, I've done it even still, because I do a lot of stuff. We speak to schools and I'll grab an engineer or somebody. And I will say, like to a person for the most part, especially, it's one thing if you're a driver because you're used to being in front of the camera, as it were. But the rest of us, we got where we are despite the fact that we're women because it's not a photo shoot, I didn't get it because there's anything else like that. And so and Simona will be the first one to tell you, and rightfully so, she's a driver. She happens to be a woman.
Right. And she's a damn good driver too.
And she's a fantastic
very
driver.
Talented one. She's see her coming.
She's a factory driver for Porsche. Like you don't get that unless you're. And they deploy her in any series that they want to. So with that said, it's funny because we're usually uncomfortable to point out the fact that we're women. Like we just want to do our job, and maybe you'll notice that we are. And I do long for the time, and hopefully it'll be soon. Like we're just a race team. But if you notice,
I get that, but I feel like right now we're in a time where it needs to be pointed out because I've been around the motorsports industry since, well, I grew up, in the local track racing scene and that kind of thing. And then, when I got into motorsports, there were women trying to get in because they had the diversity program in NASCAR. So I worked for the diversity team for a little bit for one season, and diversity was considered women.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just the thing. And actually, they're hanging on to that side of the diversity because they still don't have enough diversity.
Right.
Outside of the women diversity.
Yeah, there's not a lot of diversity in the diversity.
Exactly. So I was excited to see women coming up in the sport because, being around that team, I still saw a lot of the boys going, a lot of the women that I knew that were on the team. There was only one girl that was driving, or one woman that was driving. Girl, she was young.
I always say girl. I say girl about my peers.
At the time. Yeah, she was a girl because she was only like 18. She was very young.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that was young because I was a lot older than that at that point. And, the guys gave her a real hard time. They gave her the worst car out of the lot.
Right.
Out of all four of the cars that they had, it was the worst car they had. They made sure, unfortunately she didn't do that well. And now she's marrying a driver. So that's a guy.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. They treated her like she was diversified, and they treated her more so diversified than anybody else in the paddock. And it was obvious that nobody really wanted her to climb the ladder.
Right.
So when I see a woman get to the top of that ladder, because I've seen women do pit crew, and they're starting to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
And I've seen women drivers now. It's being more acknowledged on the drag racing side, and there's not a lot of. Yeah,
drag's been good for a long time.
Yeah, but it's still like IndyCar. I haven't seen it much, and. As far as owners, there's now a female, the first African-American female team owner, which
Where's that?
Got a lot of press. NASCAR.
That's in NASCAR.
Hold on.
The truck series,
ARCA
right?
series.
ARCA.
No, the ARCA series. ARCA.
Oh my God.
I think they're going to try to do truck
awesome.
too, but they're starting in ARCA.
Oh, I love that.
Beth, do you think that?
So there's just not enough of it. That's what I'm saying. That's why I want to toot the horn, because it needs to be more.
When I had the conversation with Roger, I said, listen, any of these things, you got to think this is a 20-year plan. Like, it depends on what the goal is. And the goal obviously is we also want more people to watch the sport. And the way that you get more people to watch is for more people to feel like it's for them. And
exactly.
And you are going to see an increase. And it's like, listen, no matter what, there was the Danica effect. When Danica was an IndyCar, and there was a point in the 500 where she led the 500, and I was not there.
And she got a lot of female viewers out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
People have told me that, like, if you could have heard the roar of the crowd in that moment, even like the old salty fan, right? Because there's that moment of like, wow, we've never seen this. And so you're just witnessing history, and there was this roar of the crowd. And they said it was like lightning in a bottle.
Yeah.
And okay, when she went to NASCAR, so there were a lot of fair weather fans who were, I'm going to watch because of Danica. Okay, great. But then when she went to NASCAR, they went with her.
Mm-hmm.
And they were still fair weather fans. But you know what? Here's the thing. The way that you're ever going to grow in these sports, whether in any of these racing, is with the fair weather. The diehard racing fan like you and me, I'm watching all 16 races on the NASCAR calendar, or I'm watching all 36 events for the NASCAR calendar. I can't watch anymore. I'm watching all of them. Yeah. So how much more are you getting out of me as a fan? I'm buying the t-shirt. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. I'm listening to Sirius XM or whatever it is. The way that you grow is to get that person that maybe watches 2 races to watch 4.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yep. The low-hanging fruit, as we like to say. And
exactly.
So Beth, do you feel like, because of some of the press, because of what's happening here in 2021, I mean, it almost feels serendipitous. Do you think this is a changing of the guard finally?
I do. I think it's a start. I think.
Yeah, it's definitely.
I will tell you this. Of anybody, I started having these conversations about this idea, and again, what's different with mine, and as I've said all along, it's about having all the members of the team being represented. So, the competition side and the business side, because all of those are integral.
Yep.
And the person who is, running competition for a team and the person that's running the commercial side, if they win the championship, they both get the ring. Because
that's right.
It's an ecosystem, and anyone in motorsports knows that and knows that value. So I wanted to lift the veil a little bit on that, because for that fan to say like, okay, this isn't interesting to me, or this isn't even where my strengths are, but this side is, great. There's a place for you. There's 25 people on a team or whatever, when you then start looking at all these layers. Okay, so that's part one. So that is what I've been talking about since 2015, about the idea of showing all those roles, and that there's places for women in all of those roles, and that it's the whole team. So it's not just the driver. And again, trying to get the story about more than the driver, because not everybody aspires to be a driver. And if you don't connect with that part of the story, then okay, but there's something else here. So I've been having this conversation about gender diversity in motorsports 1,000 times with so many different people in different facets: series, car companies, suppliers, partners that could sponsor. Probably more than anybody for the past 6 years.
I bet. Has it gotten better? Has it gotten better over the past year?
And I will tell you, in the very beginning, I think I was a little too early. But in the beginning, because I'd have these conversations, because look at somebody like, General Motors. General Motors is recruiting people right out of college, new degrees. But to plant the seed of where you need to get really good mechanical engineers, people that were going into engineering over the past few years, for the past 10 years, you're having a shift of like people that wanted to go into tech was like becoming a programmer or like creating an app.
Right.
It wasn't people like going into civil engineering and learning how to build a bridge.
Right.
And that conversation has to start younger. You can affect a kid's trajectory from 10 years old to 12 years old. That's where the magic happens, is 10 to 12.
Oh, yeah.
So I said, okay, well, if you're General Motors, you need to start talking here, and you got to play the long game. And it used to be that companies wouldn't do that because they're measuring ROI. Like they're investing on the college tour, because they're like, I'm going to talk to these college students, and then I can see how many people I hire, and there's an easy ROI.
Way too late by then. Way too late.
Correct.
Yeah.
So in fairness, that conversation has been happening more broadly, and everybody realizing, okay, it takes a village. Boeing needs to invest in 10-year-olds. General Motors needs to invest, and Microsoft needs to invest. And ultimately, they'll all scatter, but it's the rising high tide lifts all boats idea. And now companies are better about that investment and realizing there's not direct ROI, but don't worry, it will be. And so that's happened over these couple of years. So having this conversation about why STEM education matters and why it matters for girls, that conversation's a lot shorter now. It wasn't in 2015. So I've actually seen that change. So I know I can understand why everybody's cynical of thinking that this is like just a thing and whatever. But there's two things. I can tell you that the tenor has changed in the country and in the dialogue about STEM. It's in your face. Believe me, I'm tired of all these gender diversity conversations.
Right.
Oh yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
I'm so over it.
I'm ready for people to just be judged on character and actions as opposed to just anything else.
Let's just not judge. Let's just be
done
together.
Just get on with it. And there's this great quote that somebody else said, this engineer that works for this company, Forcia, which is a supplier in the automotive business. And I forget her name. It's Elizabeth. I forget her last name. But she's like, I'm so tired of the conversation of diversity. I'm leaning in so far, I'm asleep at the table. And it's so true.
Yes.
Like,
wow.
And honestly,
Yes.
I wanted to write a counterpoint to that book, Lean In, like with all due to Sheryl Sandberg.
Yeah.
Women do not need to lean in. We have been working hard. And I say this to teachers because I speak to schools all the time. And I speak to educators all the time. And I'll say to them, high school teachers, let me ask you, in your science class, who has better grades, the girls or the boys? To a person, the girls have better grades.
Yeah.
Because we work our asses off, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is my point. It's not about us leaning in. It's about you guys. It's not about leaning in or having I don't want to take your seat at the table. I want a longer table.
No.
Yeah.
So it's not about us
I just
working
want to be
harder.
part of the table.
So I want to write a counterpoint to Sheryl Sandberg. that it's not about lean in. It's not called lean in. It's called scooch over.
Love it.
Yeah.
Please do. Oh,
Yeah.
dear Lord, please do. So, and that brings me to, one of our final questions, because your career is phenomenal. I hope that people at this podcast will go look it up, go read your bio. What is your advice for other ladies with the same dreams, or just people in general with the same dreams?
Yeah, people, right? Work hard. Build your network, and and I remember reading a business case in business school about this. I should find out. I have all my cases. I should go look to find exactly the one, because it always resonated with me. And this is back in the olden days when people had Rolodexes. But that idea of when you meet people, remember who they are, remember something about them, so that when you cross paths again, and it's a genuine, authentic building of a network. It's not like, hey, this isn't about like using people, because if you're building a network, you're also part of their network, and help people out when they need help or give them advice. But when Roger Penske bought Indianapolis Motor Speedway and IndyCar, and then announced the Race for Equality and Change, I emailed him, and he emailed me back 5 minutes later.
Wow.
Why? It's because I yelled at him in 2007.
Right? Exactly. Exactly.
I was going to say, he emailed you right back. That's what I'm impressed with, because that never happens.
Right. And it's because we won a NASCAR championship together in 2012. And it's because he actually, when I was at FCA, he actually asked me, he wanted to hire me to work on his dealer side of it. So I'm at Fiat Chrysler. We've won the championship, and I think it was in 2013. He called me and he's like, I want to talk to you about a job. I was like, okay. So I go to his office, out of courtesy, as you would, because of course you're going to do that. And he actually wanted to hire me on his dealer side of the business to run like his Porsche Audi business. And I thought about it. I mean, it was like a couple days back and forth of like, talking about like salary and what the job, and I knew what the job entailed, because in theory, like I dealt with that kind of person in my other, like I knew what the role was, because I knew somebody that was in that role that covered the Aston Martin business, right? Like the liaison. And I thought about it for a couple of days, but I was only at FCA at that point for like a year and a half, 2 years. And we were putting some things in place. And I called Roger back and I said, I'm so honored for the offer, and I thank you for the opportunity, but I feel like I owe this job more seat time, because I've just built this whole strategy and I really want to roll it out and see it come to fruition. And I feel like, I relocated for this job here, and FCA relocated me, and I feel like I owe this job some more time. And he said to me, I completely respect that, and I would want someone to do the same for me. He said, the door is always open. And it was funny, because I remember telling that story to a friend like a few months later, and they're like, you turned down you said no to Roger Penske. And I was like, oh my God, you're right. I'm an idiot. Not
only did you turn him down,
you did the right thing.
You yelled at him.
It is hard to turn that down.
And turned him down.
Correct. Yeah. Right. Like it sounds worse when you say it, Chris.
Most things do, but it's a beautiful thing.
Everything sounds worse when Chris brings it up.
But Beth, I think that is what has just instilled the metal in you, and I think that's what's going to also just clear that path. Here. Yeah, absolutely. That's what's going to clear the path and make you a huge success, which you already are. And I can't wait to see even more, especially in May with the Indy 500.
And the good
better
news
be in
is,
May. They better not move it. They're not going to move it, are they? No.
Well, they're trying not to. But I will say they would move it if it means no fans, I bet.
Yeah.
I would bet, because, I mean, you have to have fans.
Yeah, you have to.
So everybody, please go get your vaccine.
Let's not speak that into existence. Well, let's leave that out of the universe for now.
Right.
It's always fun on my birthday weekend, and it's always the one thing I want to do is watch the
Oh my God, that's
And this year it wasn't, so I was like,
right. August.
Now what?
Right,
God,
what do I do? August. I know, it was weird. I know. And I felt so bad, because obviously Roger and the team there, the whole crew that works at IMS, they did so much work. There's so many things that they've done that you've seen, because they showed on TV, but I was lucky enough to see it in person. And all they want is for fans to see it, right? That's why they're doing it.
It's no fun if the fans can't be there.
Exactly. Well, you know
I've
what?
always wanted to go. I've never got to go in person. Someday.
Stop speaking it into existence. Ellen, stop it.
No, I want to go to the Indy 500.
Stop
Chris.
it.
You got to go.
Stop it.
Go.
Stop. Yes. Oh, yeah. We're going, and it's going to be in May. Stop speaking a change into existence before I bury some chicken bones in the front yard.
Absolutely. It's got to be intention. You've read The Secret. It's intention.
Exactly. I'm
Right,
speaking
exactly.
into existence.
Yeah.
Beth, thank you so much. Now,
Thank
if
you so
anybody
much.
wanted to find out more about, Beth Paretta, about Paretta Autosports, about everything that you're doing, where's the best place for them to go find that information?
Well, we know we have a shiny new website.
Ooh.
It's
That's right, it's beautiful.
ParettaAutosport.com.
Oh.
ParettaAutosport.com. We have the Twitters, we have the Instagrams, we have the LinkedIns, and
Nice.
the Facebooks.
Do you have the chat snaps?
That's right.
We have the chat snaps and the
Yes.
TikToks. No, we have none of those. We have none of those.
I have not done the talk tips. People tell me I need to do it.
I haven't been on the top tick either. But I will
I
say
haven't
this
either.
about
I don't want to make a video.
it's too many things. And let me tell you this,
Yes.
I loathe social media. I like Twitter. I
Me
know
too.
everybody has an opinion. I like Twitter because I like the news feed, and I love, like, during a race, I love when you're
You
on
can see
pit
all the
lane,
teams.
it's useful because you get updates,
Yeah.
like, especially when, like, in sports car, which I love sports car racing. It's my equal love to IndyCar. Like when you're in an endurance race, and you can see kind of what the update is of the team and the drivers. It's really an invaluable tool. So I do appreciate Twitter for that, but the rest of the social medias, it's a necessary evil.
It is a
sadly, but,
necessary evil. Yeah.
if I'm not active on it and you don't see a ton, don't blame me. It's because I hate it.
And trust me, I'm right there with you. Well, Beth, thank you so much for joining us. We can't wait to talk to you again. Please let us talk to you, because we have so many other conversations, some for the podcast, some not for the podcast. I think.
Exactly. Some for a cocktail. Yeah, I hear
Yes.
ya.
That's right.
Absolutely. Beth, thank you so
Beth,
much for
your
joining us.
time.
Thank you, guys.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
So that was our new friend, Beth Paretta. Look, I'm going to go ahead and say on record, she not only told Roger Penske no, she yelled at Roger Penske. I just want to state that again, because that's huge.
Could you imagine?
Hello?
I'm still
Did I
here.
lose you? Did I lose you? Are you blown away by Beth? You can't talk?
I can't talk. No, I'm still here. You can't hear me?
Yeah,
Hold
I can
on.
hear you now. Yeah, I got you.
Okay. I don't know what happened. Sorry. No, I mean, can you imagine yelling at Roger Penske? Because I can't.
I can't even imagine her having the chance to yell at it. I mean, that story, she is so packed full of not only energy and expertise, but so many great stories. We absolutely have to get her back on the show again. So, Beth, thank you again for joining us this week. I can't wait to see what happens in May, which it's going to be May. Don't you dare say anything different.
It's not. It's going to be May. Because I wanted it May.
It's going to be May. It's gonna be bye. With the Indy 500, and I look forward to seeing Simone lift the trophy in winner's circle right there.
That would be amazing.
How great would that be? So,
That'd be incredible. In fact, if we're just gonna say it right now, people, when Beth and Simone win the Super Bowl, really, Ellen, win the Indy 500.
it's the Super Bowl of
The
racing.
Super Bowl's on my brain. That's right, the Super Bowl of IndyCar racing. Then we're gonna get them back on here.
Yes,
That we'll get both Beth and Simone.
love it. So
We'll
you know what? And speaking of, thank you guys for being patient with us as we kick the podcast back off in 2021. We got some exciting stuff coming up, don't we? We got maybe a little change coming.
That's right. Stay tuned, people, because we might have a little bit of extra coming on here pretty soon.
Nothing
Especially by
like, and let me tell you, nothing like getting in the wintertime, getting that extra on your plate help, because of sweater weather.
That's right.
It's sweater weather.
It's going to be, we're going to have some real exciting things come up for the podcast this year. So thank y'all for being patient with us.
Mm-hmm.
And we're excited that we've already got one special guest. We're going to have a lot more cool guests, but we're also going to be doing some extras with the podcast this year. So stay tuned.
Yes, it's going to be a good 2021, because 2020 sucked. The
That's
podcast
right.
didn't. The year itself did.
It did.
If you or someone that you know would like to be featured on this podcast, please be sure to hit us up at RacingJunk.com. For Little E, this is Chris Young. Thank you for joining us here on Behind the Wheel on RacingJunk.com. Please be safe, treat each other well, and we will see you next time. Hey, what's up? It's Chris Young for Behind the Wheel on RacingJunk.com. Just want to add something to this podcast. Hopefully you enjoyed Beth's interview. We certainly did. And since Little E won the bet and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers did win the Super Bowl, and I was wrong, I'm going to say it right here that she was right, I was wrong. But notice Little E's not here, because I would never admit that to her face. Please have yourself a safe and wonderful time. We'll look forward to catching you next time here on Behind the Wheel at RacingJunk.com. Bye.